The detail that stayed with me when I prepared this story was a silver fountain pen placed beside a birthday cake that belonged to the wrong man. Not because the pen was expensive, though it was, but because of the small white card attached to it and the name that had been written where another name used to be. You're watching Diary of Owen. Let's go back to the morning when a man realized his birthday had disappeared from his own home. At 6:42 on the morning of my 37th birthday, the light from the refrigerator fell across 3 bakery boxes marked with someone else's initials. The kitchen was otherwise dark. A thin blue strip of dawn showed above the neighboring rooftops, and the heating pipes clicked inside the wall as they cooled between cycles. I stood barefoot on the slate floor, holding the refrigerator door open with one hand and a carton of milk with the other. The boxes occupied the entire middle shelf. One was square and deep enough for a layer cake. Another had a transparent window showing rows of pale macarons. The third was narrow, tied with navy ribbon, and labeled MK in black marker. My initials were DH. The date printed on the bakery stickers was October 19th, my birthday. I stared at those labels long enough for the refrigerator alarm to begin chiming. From the bedroom, my wife called my name and asked whether everything was all right. I closed the door. I said, yes, I was just making coffee. Her name was Tessa. We had been married for 9 years, together for 12, and living in the narrow brick house on Alder Row for 7. She was 35, worked as communications director for the Halden Civic Trust, and had the unusual ability to make every room feel organized within 5 minutes of entering it. She noticed crooked frames in restaurants. She remembered which neighbors were gluten-free. She kept spare phone chargers in labeled canvas pouches and birthday reminders in 3 separate calendars. That last part mattered. Tessa had never forgotten a birthday. Not mine, not her mother's, not the elderly dentist who had once removed her wisdom teeth. She still mailed him a card every February because he had mentioned during the procedure that he hated having a winter birthday. On my 33rd birthday, she had arranged a private tour of an abandoned railway station because I had spent 6 months surveying it for restoration. At 34, she found the first edition of a field manual I had used during my apprenticeship. At 35, when we were saving money to repair the roof, she made soup from my grandmother's handwritten recipe and hung 35 small photographs along the staircase. The previous year, she had woken me at 5:58 in the morning because that was the exact time printed on my birth certificate. So when I found 3 bakery boxes bearing another man's initials on October 19th, I did not initially believe she had forgotten. I assumed there was an explanation. That was how my mind worked. I was a forensic accountant. My job was not to react to the first irregularity. It was to determine whether the irregularity was an error, a coincidence, or evidence of a larger pattern. A missing invoice could be carelessness. 3 missing invoices from the same vendor, approved by the same manager, on the last working day of each quarter, were something else. People imagined my profession involved dramatic discoveries, hidden accounts, offshore transfers, executives sweating beneath conference room lights. Most of it was quieter. Most fraud revealed itself through repetition, a figure rounded too neatly, an expense submitted at the same time every month, a name that appeared in places it did not belong. The initials MK appeared in my refrigerator at 6:42 on my birthday. I made coffee and carried 2 mugs upstairs. Tessa was sitting against the headboard with her laptop open across her knees. Her brown hair was gathered into a loose knot, and she wore the gray sweatshirt she had taken from me during our 2nd year together. The sleeves covered the backs of her hands. She accepted the mug without looking away from the screen. She said she had an awful day ahead of her. I asked what was happening. She said the trust's donor reception had changed venues at the last moment. She needed to coordinate catering, confirm the photographer, collect a gift, and somehow get through a strategy meeting at 11. The silver watch on her wrist read 6:51. I waited. There are moments when silence becomes measurable. You notice the distance between one breath and the next. You count the seconds without intending to. 7 seconds passed. She scrolled through an email. 11. She asked whether I could bring in the dry cleaning after work. I said I could. She smiled, leaned across the bed, and kissed the side of my face. Then she said, "You're a lifesaver." not happy birthday. I showered at 7:15 and dressed in a charcoal suit. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror tying my tie while water gathered along the bottom edge of the glass. I told myself she was pretending. Perhaps there was a surprise waiting that evening. Perhaps the bakery boxes belonged to a donor named MK, and Tessa had stored them overnight because the reception venue had no refrigeration. That explanation was possible. The problem was the date. 3 weeks earlier, Tessa had mentioned that the donor reception would be held on October 21st. I remembered because it conflicted with a professional association dinner I had already declined. She had complained that the venue charged an additional fee for Monday events. October 19th was a Saturday. I finished the knot, flattened my collar, and went downstairs. Tessa was standing at the kitchen counter transferring macarons from one box into a lacquered wooden tray. She had changed into dark trousers and a cream blouse. Her phone rested beside the sink, displaying a checklist. Cake, macarons, pen engraved, candles, table booked 7:30. Milo confirmed. I saw the list for less than 2 seconds before the screen dimmed. Tessa placed the tray inside a canvas carrier. She said she would probably be late and that I should not wait for dinner. I asked whether the donor reception had moved to Saturday. Her hands stopped above the ribbon, only briefly. Then she said it was not the official reception. It was a smaller gathering for one of the board members. I asked which one. She said Marcus Keene. The name fit the initials. I knew Marcus, though not well. He was 42, recently divorced, and served as the Trust's interim development chair. He had joined 14 months earlier after selling a software consultancy. At 2 fundraising dinners, he had spoken to me about golf despite my telling him both times that I did not play. Tessa had begun mentioning him more frequently around Christmas. Marcus thinks the campaign needs a clearer message. Marcus found a possible venue. Marcus says the city committee will approve the grant. Nothing she said about him had sounded unusual. Colleagues often occupy more space in conversation during busy projects. I asked whether it was Marcus's birthday. Tessa looked at me. The pause lasted less than a second, but I felt it settle between us. She said his birthday had been earlier in the week, and the team was doing something small for him after the planning session. I looked at the cake box. It was designed to serve at least 20 people. She followed my eyes and said Marcus had helped secure the largest donation in the Trust's history. The staff wanted to thank him properly. I nodded. Then I asked what time she expected to be home. She said perhaps 10, perhaps later. At 7:39, she left through the front door carrying the canvas carrier in both hands. She did not remember my birthday before the door closed. I stood in the hallway listening to her shoes descend the stone steps. The car unlocked with 2 electronic chirps. An engine started. Tires passed over the wet leaves gathered along the curb. Then, the house was silent. There was a framed photograph on the console table beside me. Tessa and I were standing on the harbor wall at Bellwether Point, our coats pulled tight against the wind. It had been taken during our first weekend away together. Her cheek was pressed against my shoulder, and my left hand was closed around hers inside my pocket. I turned the frame face down. Not from anger. I simply could not look at it yet. At 8:03, I received the first birthday message from my younger sister, Elaine. She sent a photograph of us at a county fair when I was 9 and she was 6. I was holding a paper cup of lemonade, and she was crying because a goat had eaten the corner of her map. Her message said she hoped Tessa had planned something ridiculous. I typed, "She's working today, but we'll celebrate later." I deleted the sentence. Then I typed, "Thank you." That photograph should have remained buried. I went to the office because staying home would have turned the kitchen into an interrogation room with only one person in it. Our firm occupied the 6th floor of a converted textile warehouse on Marlow Street. On weekdays, 80 people worked there. On Saturdays, the building belonged to the security guard, the cleaning staff, and anyone who preferred spreadsheets to their own thoughts. I arrived at 8:37. The elevator smelled faintly of floor polish. Fluorescent lights came on in sections as I crossed the open office. Outside the windows, rain had started to fall in fine diagonal lines. My desk held a white envelope. For one unreasonable moment, I thought Tessa had arranged for it to be delivered. The handwriting belonged to my colleague, Priya. Inside was a card signed by 11 members of my team and a voucher for the small restaurant beneath our building. Priya had added a note saying she knew I disliked office celebrations, but this did not mean I was permitted to skip lunch. I sat down. It was the kindness of the card that nearly broke my composure. Not the elaborate things. Not the missed words that morning. 11 signatures in blue and black ink, written by people who had remembered because a shared calendar had prompted them. I placed the card in my top drawer and opened the financial records for a case involving a chain of private care homes. For 47 minutes, I reviewed supplier payments. Then I realized I had read the same line 13 times. At 9:31, Tessa sent me a message. She asked whether I had remembered to collect the dry cleaning. No greeting, no explanation, no small indication that she knew what day it was. I replied that I would. At 9:34, a second message arrived. She said the navy jacket was important because Marcus preferred the team to look coordinated during donor photographs. I stared at the name on the screen. There are betrayals that announce themselves with evidence. A photograph, a receipt, a message never intended for you. This was not yet that kind of betrayal. Tessa had not declared that Marcus mattered more than I did. She had simply arranged the day as though that were true. My birthday had become an inconvenience she had failed to notice. His birthday had become a project. At 10:12, I called the bakery whose name appeared on the boxes. A woman answered and identified herself as Celine. I said I was checking an order collected that morning under the name Tessa Harland. I told her I might need to adjust the inscription because the cake was for a colleague. Celine asked for the order number. I did not have it. She said she could search by phone number. I gave her Tessa's. Keys clicked in the background. Celine said the order had already been collected. A 30-centimeter chocolate hazelnut cake, 24 macarons, and a presentation box containing an engraved fountain pen supplied by the customer. I asked about the inscription. She said the cake read, "To the year ahead, Marcus." I looked through the office window at the rain. I asked when the order had been placed. Celine said September 28th at 2:14 in the afternoon, 21 days earlier. Our anniversary was September 28th. Tessa and I had eaten dinner at home that night because she said she was exhausted after a grant meeting. I had cooked sea bass, opened a bottle of wine we had saved from our wedding, and given her a thin gold bracelet engraved with the coordinates of Bellwether Point. She had given me a card. Inside, she wrote that the safest place in her life was the one we had built together. At 2:14 that afternoon, she had ordered Marcus a birthday cake. I thanked Celine and ended the call. Then I opened a blank spreadsheet. That may sound cold, but it was not. It was how I prevented myself from inventing explanations that protected me from the facts. I created 4 columns: date, event, what Tessa said, what occurred. I began with September 28th. Anniversary. She said she had been delayed by a grant meeting. Cake ordered for Marcus at 2:14. October 30. She canceled dinner with my sister because a board paper required revisions. Her car's parking account showed a charge at Lanton House, a private members club used by the trust. October 8. She said Marcus was taking the entire team to inspect a conference venue. Only 2 meal charges appeared on our joint credit card at the restaurant inside that venue. October 14th. She came home at 11:26, wearing the navy jacket, now waiting at the dry cleaner. She said the campaign team had stayed late. Her blouse smelled of fireplace smoke, though the trust's office prohibited candles and had electric heating. I stopped. I had not previously treated these moments as data. Marriage depends on the deliberate refusal to audit every inconsistency. Trust is not ignorance, but it requires mercy toward incomplete information. Once I entered the dates into columns, however, the pattern became difficult to dismiss. The issue was not necessarily an affair. The issue was allocation. Time, attention, effort, secrecy. Tessa was directing all 4 somewhere else. At 11:08, I closed the spreadsheet. I did not search her email. I did not access her private accounts. I did not call Marcus. I had enough information to understand what had happened that morning. My wife had planned another man's birthday for 3 weeks. She had ordered his cake on our anniversary. She had chosen his gift, arranged his dinner, coordinated her clothing around his preferences, and forgotten that the date she selected belonged to her husband. The forgetting was not an isolated failure. It was the final number in a sequence. At 12:20, Priya arrived carrying 2 coffees and a paper bag. She wore a green raincoat and looked irritated to find me at my desk. She said she had known I would come in. I asked how. She said I always worked when I was avoiding something. Priya had been my colleague for 8 years and my friend for 6. She had the restraint not to ask immediately. She placed a coffee beside my keyboard and took a sandwich from the bag. Then she noticed the date in the corner of my screen. She wished me a happy birthday. I thanked her. She asked where Tessa was taking me. I said nowhere. Priya removed the lid from her coffee. I said Tessa had forgotten. Priya's expression changed, but she did not offer the automatic defense people use when reality seems too uncomfortable. She did not say Tessa must be planning a surprise. She simply asked whether I was certain. I turned the laptop toward her. The spreadsheet contained only 7 rows by then. Priya read each one. When she finished, she asked who Marcus was. I explained. She sat back in the chair and looked at me for several seconds. Then she said something I would remember later. She said, "Forgetting a date is human. Building someone else's celebration on top of it is a decision." I looked at the rain threading down the window. I said I did not know whether Tessa was having an affair. Priya said that was not the only way to leave a marriage. At 1:06, we ate sandwiches in the conference room. Mine was roast chicken with mustard. I remember, because I could not taste it, but I noticed the mustard stain spreading through the paper wrapper. Priya asked what I wanted to do. I said I did not know yet. That was not entirely true. By then, a thought had begun to form. It was too severe to accept immediately, so I treated it like an uncertain figure in an investigation. I tested it against alternatives. Could I return home and wait? Yes. Could I ask Tessa to explain? Yes. Could we argue over whether she had technically forgotten, whether Marcus's event was professional, whether the cake mattered? Yes. But those questions were smaller than the truth. My wife had spent 21 days preparing to make another man feel seen. During those same 21 days, she had not once looked at the calendar and recognized the collision. Our marriage did not fail at 6:42 that morning. The morning merely reconciled the account. At 2:18, I left the office. I collected the dry cleaning from a shop on Norbury Lane. The navy jacket hung inside a clear plastic sleeve. A paper tag had been attached to the zipper. Harland, T. paid. I carried it to my car and laid it across the back seat. My phone showed 4 missed calls. 2 were from Elaine. 1 was from my mother. The 4th was from an unfamiliar number. I listened to the voicemail. A man introduced himself as Dominic from Arlen and Rowe, a stationer on Mercer Square. He said the engraving on Miss Harlan's order had been completed and that the additional gift card was ready for collection before 5. I replayed the message. Additional gift card. At 2:27, I called Dominic. I said I was Tessa Harlan's husband and that she was occupied with an event. I asked whether I could collect the order for her. He requested the collection code. I searched our shared household messages for the shop name. 6 days earlier, Tessa had sent me a photograph of a parking ticket and asked me to pay it. In the corner of the image, partially covered by her thumb, was a receipt from Arlen and Rowe. The number ended in 4816. I gave Dominic the digits. He said that was correct. The shop occupied a narrow building between a tailor and a watch repairer. Brass lamps illuminated shelves of leather notebooks, pen cases, and box stationery. The air was warm and dry after the rain. Dominic was a thin man with silver-framed glasses. He retrieved a navy presentation box from a locked cabinet. Inside lay a fountain pen with a brushed silver barrel. Marcus Keene had been engraved along the side. Beneath it was a white card. Dominic said Tessa had requested a replacement because the first inscription was incorrect. He placed both cards on the counter. The first read, "For believing in me before anyone else did. Here's to everything we're building." The second read, "For making this year possible. Here's to everything ahead." I read the first one twice. Then I asked what had been incorrect. Dominic turned the card slightly and pointed to a faint indentation beneath the printed message. The original recipient line had been erased and rewritten. The fibers of the paper were rough where the ink had been lifted. Before it said Marcus, the card had said Daniel, my name. I asked whether Tessa had explained the change. Dominic said she had come in on Thursday afternoon. She told him the pen had originally been intended for her husband, but she needed to repurpose it because a professional gift had not arrived in time. Thursday had been 2 days earlier. She had not simply forgotten to buy me a gift. She had taken the one she had chosen for me and reassigned it to Marcus. I rested both hands on the counter. The polished wood felt cold beneath my palms. Dominic asked whether I was all right. I said I was. Then I asked how much the pen cost. £780. I knew the amount before he said it. It appeared on our joint account on August 12th. When I asked about the purchase, Tessa had said it was an anniversary gift for her father, and that her mother would reimburse us. No reimbursement had arrived. I looked at the pen again. I did not feel anger in the way people describe it. There was no heat, no desire to break the glass cabinet or call Tessa and demand that she explain herself in front of strangers. I felt a clean, almost clinical grief. The pen had been mine before Marcus knew it existed. The card had carried my name before his. Tessa had removed me from the gift, just as completely as she had removed me from the day. I asked Dominic for a new card. He placed a blank one on the counter. I stood beneath the brass lamps and wrote 8 words. For the life you have chosen. I release mine. I signed it with my full name, Daniel Harland. Then I stopped. The title of a marriage is not only written on legal documents. It exists on mortgages, insurance policies, holiday bookings, emergency contacts, and the quiet assumptions made by everyone who knows you. My name appeared beside Tessa's across an entire shared life. I looked at the signature. Then I asked Dominic for another card. On the second card, I wrote only, "For the life you have chosen." There was no signature. I removed my name. Dominic watched without speaking. I placed the unsigned card inside the presentation box, beneath the pen engraved for Marcus. I folded the original card bearing the erased indentation of my name and put it into my coat pocket. I paid £12 for replacement stationery. Then I carried the gift outside. Rainwater ran along the gutters of Mercer Square. People moved beneath umbrellas, their faces lowered against the weather. A delivery bicycle passed close enough to spray water across my shoes. I stood beneath the stationer's awning holding the Navy box. One gift, no name. That was when I understood what I would do. I did not want revenge. Revenge requires continued participation. It asks you to remain emotionally attached to the person who injured you, measuring their discomfort against your own. I wanted accuracy. The marriage Tessa and I had described no longer matched the marriage we were living. My work had taught me that once 2 ledgers diverge, reconciliation required more than adjusting a single entry. You had to determine when the discrepancy began, what depended on it, and whether the structure could still be trusted. Ours could not. At 3:11, I drove home. I placed the dry cleaning on the hook beside the front door. Then I carried the Navy gift box into the dining room and set it at the center of the table. The room still contained traces of our anniversary dinner. The silver candlesticks had not been returned to the cabinet. A wine stain marked the underside of one linen napkin. The gold bracelet I had given Tessa lay in a ceramic dish near the window. She had worn it twice. I took my laptop upstairs and opened the household records. The house on Alder Row had been purchased 4 months before our wedding. I supplied 80% of the deposit using an inheritance from my grandfather. Both names appeared on the title because I believed ownership should reflect the life we intended to build, not the uneven way it began. Our savings account contained £118,000. Our mortgage balance was $206,000. We had no children. There was no financial reason for either of us to be trapped. At 3:46, I called a solicitor named Helena Voss, whom I knew through an audit involving a dissolved partnership. I told her I needed personal advice, not professional representation, and that it concerned a possible separation. She asked whether there was an immediate risk to anyone's safety or assets. I said no. She asked whether I intended to move money. I said no. She advised me not to make unilateral financial changes, not to remove property beyond personal necessities, and not to communicate anything I would regret seeing reproduced in court. I told her I did not want to harm Tessa. Helena said separation did not require harm. It required clarity. She explained the first steps: photograph documents, record account balances, prepare a list of personal property, decide whether I intended to remain in the house temporarily or leave. I knew the answer to the last question. The house had been my grandfather's gift in one sense, but it had become ours through use. Tessa selected the paint. She planted lavender beside the path. She knew which stair creaked in winter, and how to lift the kitchen window when damp weather swelled the frame. I did not want to turn our home into contested territory. I wanted distance. At 4:22, I packed 1 suitcase, 5 shirts, 3 pairs of trousers, running shoes, toiletries, the field manual Tessa had given me for my 34th birthday, my grandmother's recipe notebook. The photograph from Bellwether Point remained face down on the console. I took nothing from Tessa's side of the wardrobe. At 4:51, Elaine called again. This time, I answered. She sang the first line of Happy Birthday, badly enough that I almost laughed. Then she asked what Tessa had planned. I sat on the edge of the bed with the phone against my ear. I said Tessa had forgotten. Elaine became quiet. I told her about the cake, the pen, and the card. I did not tell her about the other dates in the spreadsheet. Those still felt private, even then. Elaine asked where I was going. I said the Lorne Hotel for a few nights. She said I could stay with her and Nathan. I thanked her, but I declined. I needed a room that belonged to no one I loved. Before ending the call, Elaine said she was sorry. I said, so am I. At 5:14, I removed my wedding ring. It had left a pale band around my finger. I placed it inside the ceramic dish beside Tessa's bracelet. The 2 circles touched. I looked at them for a long time. Then I took a sheet of cream paper from the desk and wrote a note. Tessa, the pen on the dining table was originally mine. The card was originally addressed to me. I know because I collected it from Arlen and Rowe this afternoon. You forgot my birthday while spending the day planning his. That sentence is not an accusation. It is simply what happened. I am staying elsewhere. I have not moved money, changed passwords, or taken anything that belongs to you. Helena Voss will contact you on Monday regarding the practical steps. I hope tonight gives you whatever you believed you were building. Daniel. I read the note once. Then I crossed out the final word. Daniel. I had already removed my name from the gift. I realized I did not want my name attached to the evening in any form. I rewrote the note without a signature. It did not need one. She would know who had written it. At 5:38, I placed the note beneath the navy box. Then I did something that may seem small. I opened the household calendar hanging inside the pantry door. Tessa had written Marcus dinner, 7:30, in blue ink across October 19th. The square contained no mention of my birthday. I did not erase his name. I did not write mine beside it. I closed the calendar and switched off the kitchen light. At 5:47, I left the house. The rain had stopped. Water clung to the iron railing, and the air held the pale cold that arrives after an October storm. I put the suitcase in the trunk. Before getting into the car, I looked back at the upstairs windows. 9 years of marriage were visible in ordinary objects behind that brick wall. The lamps we chose together. The mattress delivered on a snowy Thursday. The chipped bowl we kept because Tessa claimed soup tasted better from it. 100 things neither of us would have been able to divide without telling their stories. I did not feel triumphant. I felt the weight of something ending before either of us had spoken its name. The Lorne Hotel was 11 kilometers away, beside the old botanical conservatory. I checked in at 6:19 under my own name. The receptionist noticed my date of birth on the identification card and wished me a happy birthday. I thanked her. She upgraded the room without charge. It was on the 4th floor, with a narrow balcony overlooking wet trees and the glass roof of the conservatory. The carpet was dark green. A small clock beside the bed read 6:31. I unpacked nothing. At 7:02, room service delivered tomato soup, bread, and a slice of chocolate cake with one candle. I had not ordered the cake. The receptionist had arranged it. The young man who delivered the tray lit the candle and asked whether I wanted him to leave it burning. I said yes. After he closed the door, I sat beside the window and watched the flame bend in the draft from the balcony. At 7:18, Tessa called. I let it ring. At 7:21, she called again. At 7:26, a message arrived. She asked where I was and why there was a gift for Marcus on our dining table. At 7:29, another message appeared. She asked whether I had gone to the stationer. At 7:31, the time her dinner reservation was supposed to begin, she called a third time. I answered. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. I could hear music behind her. Cutlery. The low murmur of a crowded room. She asked where I was. I said I was safe. She asked what the note meant. I said it meant exactly what it said. She lowered her voice and told me nothing had happened between her and Marcus. I looked at the single candle. I said I had not claimed that it had. She said the dinner was professional, and that the gift had become necessary because Marcus's contribution had saved the campaign. I asked whether that was why she removed my name from the card. Her breathing changed. She said she had intended to replace the pen before my birthday. I asked when. She said next week. I looked at the clock. 7:34. I said my birthday was today. Silence filled the line. Not the strategic pause from the kitchen that morning. Not the momentary hesitation of someone searching for a convenient answer. This silence was recognition. She whispered my name. I did not respond. She said she had been so overwhelmed that she had lost track of the date. I asked whether she had lost track while ordering the cake on our anniversary. She said nothing. I continued before anger could enter my voice. I said the issue was not that she failed to remember one date. The issue was that she remembered every detail of his. The cake, the restaurant, the engraving, the card, the clothing, the photographs. She had not run out of attention. She had assigned it. Tessa said I was making the situation sound worse than it was. I said, I am describing it without improving it. In the background, someone asked whether she was coming back to the table. A man's voice. She covered the phone, but I still heard her say she needed another minute. When she returned, she said we should discuss it at home. I said I was not coming home that night. She asked whether I was leaving her over a birthday. I watched wax begin to spill down the candle. I said, no. I am leaving because I finally understand where I have already been left. Her breath caught. I regretted the sentence immediately, not because it was untrue, but because it was sharper than I intended. I softened my voice. I told her I would not interfere with her dinner. The gift was hers to deliver if she still wanted to. The accounts were untouched. She could remain in the house. Helena would contact her on Monday. She said I had planned all of this in a few hours. I said I had recognized it in a few hours. She had been planning it much longer. She began to cry. Quietly. The sound did not satisfy me. It made the room feel smaller. She said she loved me. I closed my eyes. There are words that remain true after they stop being sufficient. I believed she loved me in the way people love the familiar architecture of their lives. The hallway light left on for them. The person who remembers the boiler inspection. The coat hanging beside theirs. But love without attention becomes a historical fact. Something that happened once and is still reported in the present tense. I said I believed she did. She asked why I would not fight for us. I thought of Priya's words. There were many ways to leave a marriage. I said, I have been fighting for the version of us you stopped maintaining. She told me she would cancel the dinner. I looked at the time. 7:41. I said, canceling it now would not give me back the day. It would only make me responsible for ruining hers. She said it was not her day. I looked at the candle burning over my slice of cake. I said, no, it was mine. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Then I told her I needed to go. She asked whether there was anything she could do. I said, not tonight. I ended the call at 7:44. The candle had burned low enough that the flame touched the chocolate icing. I blew it out. At 8:03, Tessa sent a photograph. The Navy gift box lay on the passenger seat of her car. Her message said she had left the restaurant before dinner. I did not reply. At 8:16, another message arrived. She said she had not given Marcus the pen. At 8:20, she said she was going home. At 8:42, she wrote that she had found our rings in the ceramic dish. At 9:07, she asked me to call. At 9:51, she sent a final message. She said she finally remembered what she had written in my anniversary card. The safest place in her life was the one we had built together. She said she had not realized how far she had walked outside it. I read the message once. Then I placed the phone face down. The following morning, I woke at 5:58, the exact time printed on my birth certificate. For several seconds, I did not know where I was. Then I saw the green hotel carpet and the unlit candle on the room service tray. My birthday was over. Nothing dramatic had happened during the night. No one had arrived at the hotel. No scandal had erupted. No photograph had appeared online. The world remained almost offensively ordinary. I showered, put on running clothes, and left the hotel at 6:24. The conservatory grounds opened at 6. Rainwater covered the paths, and fallen leaves adhered to the soles of my shoes. I ran 4 slow kilometers beneath plane trees, shedding yellow leaves. At the eastern gate, I stopped beside a pond. A groundskeeper was removing branches from the water with a long aluminum rake. Each time he lifted one away, the surface trembled and became still again. I stood there until my breathing slowed. On Monday morning, Helena contacted Tessa. By Wednesday, Tessa had retained her own solicitor. For the first 3 weeks, every conversation between us concerned practical matters: mortgage payments, insurance, furniture, the annual boiler service, scheduled for November 7th. We communicated mostly by email. Tessa asked whether I wanted the house. I said no. She asked whether I wanted her to sell it. I said we should wait until the valuation was complete. She asked whether I would attend counseling. I said I would attend one session to understand whether we had anything left to discuss, but I would not use counseling to negotiate myself out of what I knew. The session took place on November 12th, in a room with 2 gray chairs and a wooden box of tissues, placed exactly between them. Tessa looked thinner. She wore the gold bracelet from our anniversary. The counselor asked what had brought us there. Tessa began with the birthday. I corrected her. I said the birthday had revealed the problem. It had not created it. The counselor asked me to describe the problem. I said I had become infrastructure, reliable, necessary, unseen. Tessa lowered her head. She said she had not meant to make me feel that way. I told her intent mattered when deciding whether someone was malicious. It mattered less when deciding whether damage was real. She said Marcus had made her feel capable during a period when the trust's director dismissed every proposal she made. Marcus praised her ideas, requested her opinion, and put her in rooms where decisions were made. I understood. That was the part people expected me to reject. But I did not. Recognition is powerful. Attention can feel like rescue when it arrives during a period of doubt. I asked whether she had loved him. She said no. I asked whether she had wanted him to love her. She cried before answering. Then she said, perhaps. That was the closest we came to naming the betrayal. No hotel room, no secret declaration, no physical evidence. She had constructed a place in another man's attention and begun living there. The counselor asked what I needed from Tessa. I said honesty, though I no longer knew whether honesty would change the outcome. Tessa said she had not realized my pen was the only gift she had prepared for me until she handed it to the engraver. By then, Marcus's dinner was approaching, and she convinced herself she could replace it. She said erasing my name from the card had felt temporary. I told her that was what hurt most, not that she had chosen him forever. That she believed she could remove me temporarily and restore me when convenient. The counselor asked whether I wanted the marriage to continue. I looked at Tessa. I remembered her at 23, standing in the rain outside a closed cinema, laughing because we had traveled 40 minutes to see a film that was no longer showing. I remembered her asleep beside me during my father's final night in the hospital. I remembered her hands pressing wallpaper flat in the upstairs bedroom, and her voice reading paint names aloud, until neither of us could distinguish one shade of white from another. The marriage was not empty. That would have made leaving easier. It was full of things I still loved and no longer trusted. I said I wanted the marriage we had promised each other. Then I said I did not believe that marriage was still available. Tessa covered her face. I did not reach for her, not because I wanted her to suffer, because comfort would have been another service I provided while disappearing from the room. The separation agreement was completed in February. Tessa refinanced the house with help from her parents and paid me my share of the equity. We divided the savings evenly after accounting for the original deposit. She kept most of the furniture. I took the dining table, though I stored it for 4 months because my new apartment was too small. Marcus resigned from the trust's board in December. I learned this from Tessa, not from gossip. She said he had accepted a position in another city. She also said she had returned the fountain pen. I did not ask whether he knew why. The pen was refunded to our joint card before the account closed. £780. One clean reversal. The card could not be refunded. Tessa mailed it to me with the final property documents. The paper still showed the rough indentation where my name had been erased. She included no letter. I kept the card for several weeks in the top drawer of my desk. Then, on the first warm Saturday of April, I carried it to the small balcony of my apartment. The balcony overlooked a row of sycamores and the back wall of a primary school. Children had drawn planets in colored chalk across the bricks. I sat at a metal table with a cup of coffee and placed the card in front of me. For the first time, I looked closely at the fibers. Daniel remained visible only when the paper caught the light at an angle. Marcus had been written more clearly above it. 2 names occupying the same space. One pressed into the paper, the other placed on the surface. I thought about the gift I had left on the dining table that night. A pen engraved for him. A card addressed to no one. My name removed from both. At the time, I believed I was withdrawing from their celebration. Only later did I understand that I had withdrawn from a role I had continued performing long after it stopped being mutual. The dependable husband, the patient listener, the person waiting at home while someone else received the best of her attention. I tore the card once through the center, then again. The pieces did not separate neatly because the stalk was thick. I placed them in a ceramic bowl and carried them downstairs to the recycling bins. When I returned, the coffee had cooled. Sunlight crossed the table and illuminated the pale circle on my left hand, where the wedding ring had once rested. The mark was almost gone. I opened a new notebook and uncapped an inexpensive black pen from the hotel beside the conservatory. On the first page, I wrote the date, April 17. Beneath it, I wrote my name, Daniel Harland. The ink dried without being altered. I left the notebook open in the sunlight and went inside, while outside, a breeze moved softly through the sycamore leaves and turned the empty page.